Gang, Mr. Landis here. Distance learning, lesson 3, week 3, causes of the Civil War, 1B. So we're still in our first part here of this cause of the Civil War. Our final topic, and that is the Compromise of 1850. A couple things to remember. Remember this metaphor I've been using about the wedge. Slavery is a wedge. It's going to drive itself into America like this log and split it in half, right? Every event that we're going to see on the way to the war, think about it like a pounding of this wedge, right, into the log. This metaphor works a lot of ways. People say, oh, the Civil War wasn't about slavery. Okay, false, it was. But it wasn't just slavery. It was slavery underneath everything, right? The laws and events we'll see, for example, today, were about slavery. And they drove slavery deeper, which divided the country. Here's our big question today. How did the Compromise of 1850 increase tension between North and South? Remember that tension, how did it further split the nation? How did it divide us, right? And we're going to see that it did that because it forced the North to participate in slavery, particularly through a law they hated called the Fugitive Slave Act. And many of them refused to do it. So remember that we're talking about both political law action and also social action, people action. Okay, so both of these things are in play. Today you're going to see that by trying to keep the nation together as we spread west, we instead drove the issue of slavery further into America, which caused more tension over it, right? More people divided over it because of what it forced them to do. Now, it's important you don't misunderstand. Northerners were not all against slavery, although many were. And those who were against it, some of them were against it for various reasons. Some thought it was morally wrong. Some thought it was just bad. That doesn't mean they were for racial equality like we think of in 2020, but they understood it as wrong. Doesn't mean there wasn't any racism in the North. It just meant that their belief, remember what we said, they're approaching that point in their conscience where they believe that it is morally wrong. Right? Remember what Lincoln said, if slavery isn't wrong, then nothing is. Okay, great thing to keep in mind. Today we're going to look at this compromise that tried to keep the nation together. Okay, you may remember from our quick recap from the Missouri Compromise last time that what happened, right, in our nation was to keep this power in the Senate together, right, to keep it even. We had Missouri right here enter as a slave state and Maine as a free state. What that did is that kept the balance of power in the Senate at 24 votes, right? 12 and 12, so each side has 24 votes. That way no law could be made against or for slavery. That's to keep the Southerners from that fear of the North kind of getting rid of it. Picture of the Missouri Compromise pictured here. You've got, I'm going to get my pen here. This is Missouri right here, right? So Missouri was added as a slave state, Maine is a free state, and we took this green line and we said no slavery is allowed up here. Not open to slavery. We said this is open to slavery. Okay, I'll put NS here. No slavery. This is open to slavery. OS, open to slavery. Okay. Now some of you may be thinking, you nerds out there, may be thinking, Mr. Landis, how is this even legal? How can you actually even say that a place is or is not open to slavery? Well, they're saying it here, okay? The Congress is making the law. They're saying that it is and is not here. Now, some of you are forethinking, though. Say, Mr. Landis, we know we're going to get land to the west, right? Last time we talked about expansion causing problems. Well, here it is. California wants to enter America. Hallelujah, right? Remember the Mexican-American War? We're going to get territory in the Southwest, right? So they want to come in, but they only want to come in as a free state. That's what you read about. So the question then is, what the heck do we do? We know that's going to mess up the balance. Everybody freak out, right? The Senate now is going to be imbalanced, right? Unbalanced. What do we do? The compromise they came up with, headed by the main man, Senator Henry Clay from Tennessee. Here's what he said, okay? By the way, you're noticing this is a photograph. Ooh, technology. No longer are we in the realm of portraits, right? A painting. So, foreshadow the Civil War, we're going to have a war, the first war ever, to be photographed. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, here is Henry Clay's compromise. Number one, the North gets, remember, compromise, you get some of what you want, but not all. Here's what the North gets. Number one, they get California as a free state. Okay. They also get the slave trade in the nation's capital is banned. It's gone. It's no longer legal. Okay, which again, you think of when that's ironic that we've had the slave trade there anyway, but that's a different point. Okay, now that's what the North gets. Now what does the South get? Okay, here we go. The South gets an extension of the popular sovereignty law in the West. So as we spread west, citizens who live in Utah and New Mexico vote on the issue of slavery, like we said in Kansas. I'm sure that won't cause any problems. Essentially, this opens the territory to the potential of slavery. Okay, so maybe they become slaves, right? We kind of put a band-aid for down the road. And then lastly, and we'll see most controversially, a strict fugitive slave law. There have been many fugitive slave laws so far in America. This one is significant because it is so strict, and we'll see that in a second. Here's a map of the Compromise 1850. So we've got California over here as a free state. We've got these territories in the light pink, which means they're open to slavery. I'm going to put OS here, open to slavery. Right, and the capital here, slavery over here where the capital is banned, no more slavery there. And we have a very, very strict law. So there's a lot of things. You can tell we're just kind of trying to bandage this thing, keep it together, keep the nation from splitting apart over slavery. Here's what they come up with. Now, the most controversial part of this was the Fugitive Slave Act. I want to share with you why. I'm going to show you some primary source from the law itself. That's right, I've got no life. I'm stuck in my house with my kids. And so I've been reading some primary sources. So here's what I'm going to read you, two pieces of the Fugitive Slave Act to show you how it increased tension. Take a look at this one. Here's what the law said. It shall be the duty of all marshals and deputy marshals, meaning cops, policemen in local towns, to obey and execute all warrants. Remember, a warrant is an issue from a judge that says recapture this person, this criminal, this property, issued under the provisions of this act. So what this means, this is a federal law. The states must obey it, even down to the cities and the counties and the towns, right? So a Warrington police officer would have to obey a warrant that said this person from the state of Virginia is here to recapture this slave. That Warrington cop must obey it. Now think about the problem of that. Is a Warrington cop from the North for or against slavery? Most likely he's against it. Maybe he's not for racial equality, but he's against it on principle. Certainly on the principle of having a Southerner in his backyard shoving a warrant in his face saying, go recapture this slave, right? The Northerners do not like the Southerners up in their territory forcing them to obey this law. Okay, it gets worse though. Any person who shall knowingly and willingly obstruct, that's any person, right? I'm going to circle that. Any person, that's me, that's you in your house. Let's say a slave ran into your backyard in your shed. You didn't tell the police. Oh, that's you knowingly and willingly obstructing. Hinder or prevent any person from arresting such a fugitive shall be subject to a fine not exceeding $1,000 and imprisonment. Look at this, a fine and imprisonment not exceeding 6 months. Here's what this means, guys. A slave runs into your backyard, you see it, you don't tell the cops. They find evidence you live there. You could be put in jail or fined because you obstructed, you prevented, you hindered that police officer and that person from the South executing that warrant to recapture that slave. You could be subject to a fine or imprisonment. So what this does is it forces Northerners to take part in something that they hate. That's why it was such an increase in tension. Okay, some more ways that this worked itself out. Take a look. A great primary source your textbook has, which is a flyer. This is in Boston, right? A very city that's very anti-slavery, very abolitionist city. Here's a flyer. I kind of blew up parts of it. So look what it says. Caution, colored people of Boston, one and all. You are hereby respectfully cautioned and advised to avoid conversing with, look at this, watchmen and police officers in Boston. Why? Well, think about what we just read. What did the law require watchmen and police officers of Boston to do? Act as slave catchers, right? Here's why. Look what it says. For since the recent order of the mayor and the aldermen, they are empowered to act as kidnappers and slave catchers. And they have already been actually employed in kidnapping and catching and keeping slaves, shipping them back south. Therefore, if you value your liberty and the welfare of the fugitives among you, so we know it was a haven for fugitives, shun them in every way possible, the police, and so many hounds on the track, and so many hounds on the track of the most unfortunate of your race. Keep a sharp lookout, kidnappers, right? Look at the date, 1851. Okay, so here's right after the compromise is introduced. Now, why does this matter? Why am I stopping on this slide? Because look what it says. The Northerners are telling the other Northerners to literally disobey the federal law. Now think about why that would increase tension. Well, because the Southerners are saying, we gave you a free state in California. We gave you slavery banned in D.C. You must follow this part too. They're refusing. They're not just not doing it. They're telling other people to break the law. This increases tension. At the same level, so does things like this. Here we have our poster for a reward. Okay, I'm going to zoom in on here. Take a look. $100 reward. Ran away from the subscriber on the 27th of July, my black woman named Emily. So this is a guy who wrote in the paper, like you would on, Craigslist ad or something. One of my slaves ran away. Okay, look what he says. 17 years of age, she's describing her. Well-grown, black color, has a whining voice. She took with her, he's describing her clothes, one dark calico and one blue and white dress, a red corded gingham bonnet, a white striped shawl and slippers. This is where it gets interesting. I will pay the above reward if taken near the Ohio River on the Kentucky side, or $300 if taken in the state of Ohio and delivered to me near Lewisburg, Mason County, Kentucky. Now, why does that matter? Look at the date, 1853. Why would this guy pay? Look what he says. I will pay $100 if taken in Kentucky. Ooh, a slave state. Look at that. Kentucky, purple slave. But he says, if you cross this river here, on the Ohio side, and you take her there, I will give you $300. He triples the price. Why would he do that? Because that is unfriendly free state soil territory, where while it's technically legal, we have roving bands of Ohioans who are sick of the Southerners coming in their territory, and we know this, many instances of this. We call this border wars. We've got people fighting along these borders. The Northerners do not like the Southerners up here in their backyards, and so they will, roving bands of gangs and, guys in the neighborhood, they will get their guns and they'll spread the word and they'll say, we will have no Southerners up here taking people back. Even though they maybe aren't for racial equality, they're against slavery and they're against certainly Southerners coming up with guns into their backyards. I mean, imagine if a bunch of people from Virginia right now, 10 guys, shady guys, came into your county, in your town, came into Warrington and had their weapons out and were looking for people to take back. That is an infringement, you believe, on your state freedom. So there's an issue you're noticing we're heading towards. Can a state make a law for or against slavery? It seems like they can't. If the fugitive slave law is allowed to be enacted in a free state, then that sounds like slavery is allowed no matter what. But Northerners say, sorry, we're not going to follow it. Okay, so our big question, why did the Compromise of 1850 increase tension? Here's what we saw. It forced the North to participate in slavery, which they hated, right? Not just because it was evil, but because they hated their state sovereignty and their freedom, their way of life, being infringed upon by Southerners who were coming up in their backyards with guns and gangs and taking away human beings, right? It wasn't just because of racial issues. It was primarily a combination of the morality of slavery and also their sovereignty and their freedom as they're members of their own state. Next time, we're going to head into our next cause, right, as we march toward the Civil War. Remember my metaphor of our wedge. We're dividing America every time that slavery is being divided, right, dividing America by these laws and these social actions that are happening in the country. See you next time.